Welcome to Kaiser Watch with John Kaiser. I'm your host, Jim Goddard. John, welcome back. What's coming up on today's show?
Jim, glad to be back on the show. Today we're going to talk about Verde Agritech's first half results that they reported last week, and we're going to talk about a new development in the James Bay Lithium Great Canadian Area play.
How did Verde Agritech's alternative potash sales do during the first half of 2023?
Verde Agritech released its results for Q2, which of course includes the first half, on Monday, August 14th, and the stock promptly dropped. And it was no surprise because the revenues in Q2 were only $10.3 million compared to $24.9 million last year. But that's not really surprising because potash prices have declined 40% in the first half of 2023 after dropping 50% from their 2022 peak in the second half of last year. But what was really disappointing was that physical volume was only 107,000 tons, with it was just a little bit more than half of what they sold in the 215,000 tons that they sold in the quarter of last year. And so for the total of the first half, it's 215,000 tons compared to 314,000 tons. And this is disappointing because last year they accomplished that with their installed 600,000 ton per annum capacity. They managed to deliver by late September the expansion to 2.4 million tons. So they now have 3 million ton per annum capacity. And they are now underperforming their original capacity. So this has caused the market to wonder, okay, is their strategy of eventually selling 50 million tons of K-Forte as an alternative to conventional potassium chloride imported, ultimately replacing over 50% of Brazil's potash consumption? Is this strategy failing? Now, they did manage to squeak out a $133,000 profit for that period and $4.1 million EBITDA, so they're not quite yet in danger of bleeding cash flow. The problem, as it was explained in their press release, is that the farmers have been experiencing declining crop prices, and they deferred forward selling because they expected crop prices to improve later in the year, but in fact that has not yet happened. And so now as they're heading into that planting season in the second quarter, or at least the ordering season, Brazil's still got an official 13.75% interest rate, and inflation's just over 4%, so that's quite high. And the farmers are screaming for credit from their input suppliers, and the biggest input suppliers, of course, are the fertilizers. In this case, what affects NPK is potash. Now, the foreign suppliers of potassium chloride, they have much lower interest rates, and they are able to extend all kinds of good credit terms to the farmers. But NPK is stuck with a 16% or so rate for its line of credit, and the covenants say that the line of credits cannot cover more than 20% of the revenues. So this really hamstrings NPK's ability to compete in this distressed market where our farmers have been putting off potash purchases, are suffering from their own credit crisis and weak crop prices, and this has caused sales to slump. Now, this is conceivably a temporary problem that they can survive when things normalize again. But again, the question is, how long can they tread water like this with a 3 million ton capacity processing plant? And the reason the stock had taken off in the past month and then dropped when this news came out and has since started to recover was that a month ago they announced that a study had confirmed that K-Forte absorbs about 120 kilograms of carbon dioxide for every ton of K Forte applied to a field, and it converts it into a carbonate mineral, which is really important because that is permanent. So they've in essence discovered a free byproduct of applying K Forte, and this does not happen with potassium chloride. The chloride ion just turns into a salt and drains away in the water and wrecks the soil and the local waterways, while the potassium itself gets absorbed by the plant. But K Forte, because it is a complex silicate mineral, it actually, as the potassium is liberated through the root secretion and microbial action, it also creates the conditions that takes the carbon dioxide that's in the soil and converts it into a permanent mineral. And this has opened up the way, a path for potentially a killer market penetration strategy, and that is selling a carbon credit attached to each ton of K Forte applied to the fields. And so they are now working with various groups. They put out a subsequent news release saying they're actually in advanced discussions, negotiations for structuring a product like that. And in there, they also slipped information about how much carbon dioxide is produced in the production, the processing, the shipping, and applying of K Forte. And that turns out to be about 20 kilograms of carbon dioxide. So they have 100 kilograms net of carbon dioxide that they could sell as a carbon credit associated with each ton. Now, this is really important because obviously NPK as an individual private company cannot compete against the big giants who are exporting potash into Brazil and are able to extend credit terms that NPK cannot do. But for a bigger company that has deep pockets and is looking at this carbon credit angle as a way to discount the K Forte product, get away from this parity pricing trap that the company has adopted, able to offer a meaningful discount to the farmers, then suddenly K Forte becomes competitive. And, just grinding up to 3 million tons per year output, that in a sense is chump change. If you still have to divide that by 6, so that's really only 500,000 tons of potassium chloride equivalent that would be produced. But scaling to 50 million tons, well, that's something that's a bunch of capital infrastructure. And with this carbon credit, if they can pull this off, Verde Agritech will probably not be around long because somebody big will make a bid. At what price will this happen? Normally, mining companies, that they're based on some sort of percentage of the NPV of the mine life that's been envisioned for a deposit. But this is a different story. This is a growth story. This is taking these billions of tons of Verdeci slate and scaling them up to a production rate of 50 million tons per annum. Now, everything could come together nicely for Verde Agritech in the next quarter. Last year, all the fuss, potassium chloride prices soared over $1,000 per ton after sort of plodding along just over $200 a ton for much of the past decade. And that was when Russia invaded Ukraine in late February. There was a period of supply disruption. And when you look at the USGS production figures for potash for Belarus and Russia, they are substantially down from their prior year production. So there was a period of disruption, and it happened to coincide with major planting periods, and NPK was able to benefit from that last year. And this worked out really well for them. But the Belarusians and the Russians were able to get their product back to market later in the year, and to such an extent that the price of potash has fallen sharply. But right now, there's something going on again. On Monday, the U.S. State Department put out the highest security level warning telling American citizens to leave Belarus as soon as possible. The Wagner troops are supposedly parked in Belarus. Lithuania, Poland, and Latvia, who share Belarus's northern border, have built up their troops. Supposedly, this is to stop these refugees that Lukashenko has been importing from the Middle East, probably transiting through Russia, and then telling them to go north into the NATO countries as a form of a destabilization strategy. Flood a country with immigrants, and all of a sudden everybody gets upset because these people, why are they here? Why are we stuck taking care of them? But the troop buildup does not make sense to deal with this. What I think may be happening, Putin with his situation, dug himself in so deep, he has no exit. It's turning into a war of attrition, but its ruble is now collapsing. They've increased their interest rates, which is going to put more stress on their economy. He can't really outlive this or be the survivor in this game of attrition. So something is coming to a head, and I believe it involves Belarus. And one speculative theory is that the Wagner Group will go on a type of suicide or glory mission, whatever you want to call it, invading Ukraine from the north. Do what Putin's troops failed to do back in late February, March of last year. Now, the Wagner Group is a mercenary group, and the possibility is that the Americans who are watching this Ukraine basically not winning this war and this dragging on, and a lot of Americans are not in favor of supporting Ukraine. They say, give it to Putin. We don't care. In fact, we like Putin as a model for what kind of leader we would like to have. The Americans can't sit there and watch this forever. So there is a possibility that NATO, if the Wagner Group does invade Ukraine, does become involved. And that's not the same as getting involved with the Russian troops coming in from the eastern part of Russia. And of course, if this happens, Belarus becomes very unstable, and its own people become refugees wanting to flee the country. So something's brewing. If it does come to this, there may be another major Belarusian potash supply disruption, which will send prices shooting up again. If at the same time Verde Agritech can package a carbon credit and start selling that so that the farmers don't have to pay the new soaring price, that could turn around this sales slump that they've had to endure this year.
Anything new with the James Bay Lithium Great Canadian Area play?
Well, when you look at the SOPFU map, the areas circled as burning are no longer solid red. These are areas where the fires are going out. Much of the James Bay area is now colored blue, meaning the fire danger has subsided. And in fact, I've heard now that it's raining. The Billy Diamond Highway, last I heard, was still closed, so you can't access the Trans-Taiga Highway to get into all the Corvette Trend, all those projects on that sort of east-west trend. But boots are back on the ground. Companies are able to get into it, and I've been following up with the help of my new lithium index, seeing the different companies, which ones are popping. When we do the next Kaiser Watch episode, I'll go into a lot more detail with all these different groups. But the one that caught my attention this week was Brunswick Exploration on Monday, put out an update on its Mirage project, and they have now had boots on the ground for several weeks. Originally, this was a 1.7 kilometer long field of spodumene-bearing boulders, quite large crystals, the right color kind, not the kind suggesting iron impurities or anything like that. But they didn't know what the source was, and they published a diagram of the boulder train, but also now along a 2.7 kilometer trend with the same alignment as the boulder field trend. They've now found multiple outcropping spodumene pegmatite, and they are preparing to start a drill program. Because of the ground cover and stuff, they can't really tell how big and wide. One of them's fairly wide, 80 meters wide, 100 meters long, but that's just the outcrop. So they're going to go in there with basically a scout drilling program to sort out the angle, the dip, the orientation, the thickness of these bodies, and set the stage for hopefully what will be a delineation drilling program in January winter. Most of the companies will not be able to mount a drill program because of the late start in the boots on the ground field prospecting season. But if they do find these types of spodumene-bearing pegmatite outcrops, they will be in a position to mount drill programs in the winter. And next winter, there'll be in December, there'll be a lot of flow-through funding available for this, and everybody's going to try and get work done in winter, just in case we have another horrible fire season such as we did this year. And the important thing is we're starting to see other companies respond. That whole Mirage area, the Brunswick guys kind of blew it when they put out that first press release. They had not yet staked what was available around it. There's one group, One Minerals, which has also gone by the name One Lifestyle Holdings, which has been getting exorbitant terms for its little moose pasture properties adjoining other properties. The press release included a very expensive deal, $500,000 up front, but the rest of it sort of spread out over 3 or 4 years. I think they've picked up a buffer zone on the north. There seems to have been some confusion about ice direction and orientation, because when I talked to Killian Charles the week after the initial press release came out, I'd assumed that, I knew the ice direction is from northeast to southwest, and I assumed the train was aligned along that. And of course, the hope was that rather than some round kimberlite type pipe, that the source is actually an elongated pegmatite dike in the same direction. So even though it's kind of a fairly narrow, a couple 100-meter wide train, it still is coming from a substantial tonnage source. And he corrected me, saying, no, it's perpendicular to the ice direction. And I thought, wow, that means it must be really close by, because you do not get a narrow band like that from a distant target. But when they put out the diagram, you could see that, no, it's not perpendicular to the ice direction. However, they have now confirmed that we are dealing with a northeast-southwest emplacement trend for these pegmatite dikes, and they are spodumene bearing just like the boulders, and they occur over a 2.7 kilometer trend, and it's still open in all directions. They don't seem to have found any outcrops to the southwest, but that whole trend, which used to be part of the Virginia Gold's property area way back in the 2000s. Part of it ended up being staked by Globex Mining. Everything that Brunswick has so far at Mirage is on the 100% option ground from Globex. They do have claims to the northeast that they staked. They've now staked a buffer zone, and they also have a piece to the west, in the middle of which is a block. It's called LaSalle. It turns out that Midland Exploration own that, also for the gold greenstone. In fact, the website that they have still claims it's available for auction. But somewhere along the way, a private group, auctioned 75% for about $2.5 million over 3 years exploration, and they flipped it to an Australian company, a relatively new one that started off in gold and is now in Canada, called Cosmos Exploration, and they own that segment. They also have a bigger land package, what they call Corvette Far East, which is in the eastern part of the Patriot Battery Metals Corvette trend. But this one here is within that same greenstone belt that seems to be the gateway for these pegmatites that are present on the Mirage ground, and that stock has been doing well. And all the land around it has been staked by others. Even Chuck Fitke's Metalex Ventures has a land package to the south, and Jody DeRouge has a big land package to the east. And interesting development, as part of the news, Brunswick announced that 8 inlier claims had been now included into their Osisko development deal, where they can earn 90% over a number of years in the Plex and Anatakal West and Anatakal. But these ones, they can only earn 75%. There's not anything extra they get to do, but once they vest with the other one, they have 75%. And these little claims seem to be up ice from where they have the spodumene-bearing pegmatite outcrop. But what's also come out, just talking to people from the company, is that Sean Rosen has now woken up that this lithium stuff is real, and all these other properties in James Bay that are still in Osisko development, they are now preparing to launch it as as an Osisko lithium James Bay play, taking all those former Virginia gold properties that they still have and launch it as a new company to make available as part of their stable. So when people were speculating some time ago that Brunswick might become Osisko Lithium, I don't think that's going to happen anymore. I think at this point, Bob Wares and Sean Rusin are probably competitors in the James Bay region. And Bob said that, their focus right now is James Bay. They definitely want to get boots onto the Plex property. Their camp was nearly burnt down, but it was spared. Only 1/10 was burnt. They want to get in there. They're not going to be able to drill anything, but they have so many pegmatite outcrops already identified that they need to shoot with their gun. And of course, they want to get back onto Anatacao and follow up that east-west oriented pegmatite within that same deformation corridor that holds Allchem's Sear Galaxy project. So I think we're going to see a lot more news bursts such as confirmation, the boots on the ground have found spodumene-bearing pegmatite outcrops, and hopefully by September we have Lithium Mania 2.0, at least with a James Bay focus becoming airborne and creating some excitement in this pretty doggy resource junior market.
John, thanks for the update.
You're welcome, Jim.
I'm Jim Goddard. Comments made on Kaiser Watch are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any manner whatsoever as a recommendation to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Archived online at kaiserresearch.com.